Hello, today I'm going to tell you what is Python indentation, why indentation is so important in Python, and how you can avoid indentation errors when you are running your code or programs. In Python, indentation refers to the spaces that one leaves at the beginning of a line of code or statement. Python uses indentation in a very big way to indicate a block of code. In some programming languages like R, Java, and C, a block of code is indicated by curly braces, but in Python, a block of code is indicated by indentation. Let me demonstrate to you how Python uses indentation by writing a program in Python that computes the grade of a student. I will write the program in Jupyter Notebook. First, I need to open Jupyter Notebook. To open Jupyter Notebook, I usually go to this search bar and type Jupyter with a Y. And then from the Jupyter Notebook icon that appears, I click it. After a few seconds, Jupyter Notebook dashboard opens in a new tab that is shown here. This Jupyter Notebook tab is called Jupyter Notebook Dashboard, and from this Jupyter Notebook Dashboard, you can be able to see all the files in your working directory. In addition to this Jupyter Notebook Dashboard, there is also a black Jupyter Notebook server that appears. Usually, if you close this server, you'll not be able to use Jupyter Notebook. So, while you are using this Jupyter Notebook, you need to minimize it. Then, after opening this Jupyter Notebook server, the next thing that you need to do is to create a new Jupyter Notebook. So if you want to create a new Jupyter Notebook that uses a Python kernel, you need to go to this new button that is on top of the Jupyter Notebook dashboard, and from the drop-down menu, you click Python 3. When you click this Python 3, a new Python 3 Jupyter Notebook will open in another tab. So the first thing that I do after opening a new Jupyter Notebook is to give it a name. So let us rename this Jupyter Notebook indentation. Indentation. Once you have typed the name in this cell, you can hit rename, and you can see that the name of our Jupyter Notebook has changed next to the Jupyter Notebook logo. So even when you go to your dashboard, if you want to see the Jupyter Notebook that you have created, I normally hit this button, last modified button, 2 times, so that I can be able to see the last modified file in this Jupyter Notebook dashboard. And I can be able to see that a minute ago, I created a new Jupyter Notebook with a name indentation.ipynb. Now, let us go to our Jupyter Notebook so that we can demonstrate the use of indentation in Python. So let's say that we want to write a Python program that computes a grade of a student. So if, for example, you want to give your project a title will be narrative text. So the first thing that if you want this cell to contain narrative text, not Python code, you need to highlight it so that it can be on command mode, and then from the toolbar you go to cell and you select markdown. So this markdown will tell Jupyter Notebook that actually this cell will be narrative text, and then you say a Python program that computes the grade of a student. So If you want to make this narrative text a level 1 header, you need to type a hashtag with a space in front of it while the cell type is marked down. So this one now will be a level 1 header. So if we run this cell, we'll see that this cell will run and add a cell below it. Also, you can be able to see, because we specified a level 1, a program that computes the grade of a student as a level 1 header, you can be able to see it from the content. Now, if you want now to store the grade of a student in a variable called score. So let us begin with a comment. A comment in Python usually begin with this hashtag, which tells Python to ignore this particular line, or this particular line is not part of Python code. Our comment will be store the score of a student in a variable called score. So let's say a student scored 85 marks. So we'll store the 85 in a variable called score. So this particular Python code, so this equal sign is called assignment operator. Its function in Python, it tells Python to store this value in a variable called score. So variable names usually are always on the left side of this assignment operator, while values are always on the right side of this assignment operator. Now if we run this cell, it will store 85 in a variable called score. If you want to see if you want to see to confirm that 85 has been stored in a variable called score, we need to print its value. Print is a special function in Python that is usually used to print or to output a particular value. For example, now if we give it score, it will output the value that is stored in a variable called score. So if we run print, we see it has printed 85. Now that we have stored the score of the student in a variable called score, let us write the code that computes the grade of a student. So, as usual, let's begin with a comment that is used to explain what the code that you are about to write will do. So, the code that you are about to write will compute the grade of a student. Now, this the what we'll use to compute the grade of a student is a if-else statement. So if-else statement in Python is usually begins with a Python keyword if that tells Python that we want to check whether a particular condition has been met. So if the score is greater than or equal to 90 and score is less than or equal to 100, you put this colon. Actually, in Python, this colon are what usually is used to indicate indentation. So if we press enter on our keyboard, it will actually leave a space before this particular this that the third line. So here we write print A. So this space here is what actually what is called indentation in Python, this space here. So if we enter, now we want to check whether the grade is between 80 and 90. So there we don't need any indentation. So else if score is greater than or equal to 80 and score is less than 90. So if you put this colon, it will automatically leave a space indicating indentation after this colon. It will print B. So then we don't have to leave indentation. So we say else if score is greater than or equal to 70 and score is less than 80, then you put a colon to indicate indentation, you print C. Else if score is greater than or equal to 60 and score is less than 70, and then you put this colon to indicate indentation, you print D. So you don't need indentation there. So you say else if score is greater than or equal to 50 and score is less than 60, you print E. So actually I want to print E once a person has scored from 0 to 60. So then you can say else if a value is either less than 0 or greater than 100, you want to print something like print you have entered an invalid range. Now this code that computes the grade of a student demonstrate the use of indentation. So indentation is this particular space that we leave before this print statement. So you can notice that before each and every print statement, there is a space that is left. This is actually what is called indentation, and indentation is used to indicate a block of code. For example, in this particular Python statements, it tells you that if the score of the student is from 90 to 100, you should print only this one. Else, if this elif is a Python keyword that is used to indicate else if. So else if score is from 80 to 89, which is less than 90, you should print this block of code. So So then if this score is from 70 to 79, you should print this block of code. So now if we run this, because our score is 85, we're expecting it only this block of code to run. So if I run this, you can see, it has print this block of code because the 85 is between 80 and 90. So it has only run this block of code. So this block of code is associated with this else function. So that is the work of indentation, is to tell you that if this one, now for example, if for example we have a wrong indentation, so just that one is wrong indentation. So this one is like telling Python that all these elif statements are associated with this condition or this if statement. So if I run this, I'll get a syntax error because I've put this elif function where it's not supposed to be. So I need to go back and return it to where it was. Now, if I don't put any indentation here, if I don't put any indentation here and then I run, I'll get an indentation error because after this colon, it was expecting an indentation to be here, and yet I've not put any indentation. So I can go back and then I press enter, and then once I run it, I'll see that now the indentation error will go. Now in Python, these spaces that we leave here, by convention, there are 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there are 4 spaces. Even if you check this one, it is 1, 2, 3, 4. So by convention, Python indentation, we normally leave 4 spaces. 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So that is actually what is indentation in Python, and actually this program demonstrates the use of indentation in Python. If I change this to 95, I'm expecting that this block of code will run. This one will not run because this condition has not been met. This one will not. This block of code will not run because this condition has been met. Only this block of code will run because this 95 is between 90 and 100. So let us run this code first so that we can store 95 in this cell. Then if we run print, we see our score is 95, and then if we run this cell, we see it has printed A because this one. So if we change it to 75, we're expecting only this block of code to run. So let us store let us store first, then let us print its value, and then let us run this one. So it has printed C. So for example, if we enter a value that is out of range, say 105, and so then so this one will not run because it's not between 90 and 100. This one will not run because 105 is not from 80 to 89, and then the score, this one will not run because this 105 is not from 70 to less than 80. Only this one will run because all this condition has not been met. So if all these conditions have not been met, this block of code that is associated with this else statement will run. So let us run it. You see, you have entered invalid. So that demonstrates the use of indentation in Python to indicate a block of code, and we have said that is actually 4 spaces. Now let me demonstrate the use of indentation by writing a program that prints from 1 to 10 using a for loop and a while loop. One of the places in Python that indentation is used is in writing loops. So to write our program that prints 1 to 10, let us begin by writing a title of this section as a level 1 header. So the first thing that we need is to go to the edit to make sure that the cell type of this cell is a markdown from this drop-down menu from the toolbar. So we have converted the cell type of this cell to markdown, and then I write a program that prints from 1 to 10. So that will be the title of this section. To make it a level 1 header, I need to put one hashtag with a space before this particular text. Now let me run this cell. After running this cell, you can see from your content that you have included a level 1 header in the table of content. Now, because this subsection will be using a for loop. So we need also, this one is narrative text, so we have to convert this cell to markdown. And then we have to put a hashtag in front of two hashtags in front of it because it is a level 2 header. Yeah. So then once we run it, you can see now it is a level 2 header from the table of content. Now let us begin writing the code. So the code will begin with a keyword for. A keyword for in Python normally tells Python that you are about to write a for loop. For I in range. So this range is a special function in Python. There are normally two types of functions, the inbuilt functions and the user-defined functions. Inbuilt functions are functions that came with Python when you installed it. They are also called predefined functions, while user-defined functions are functions that you write yourself. So these range functions can take, so if we say the start where we want to start and then 11. So what this means is that this range will create a sequence from 1 to 10 because the endpoint that we put here is not inclusive in the sequence. For I in range, and then you put a colon. Once you put this colon, automatically Python expects indentation. So print I. This particular code tells, you can read it as, for each value, for each item in this sequence, you print that item. For I, representing item, for I in range from 1 to 11, meaning a sequence from 1 to 10, because this 11 is not inclusive. A sequence meaning 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 10. Print I. So once I run this one, this because it's code, you have to ensure that it's code from this drop-down menu. So once I run this using this run button, I can see that I've been able to write a program that prints 1 to 10 using a for loop. Maybe say that, so this, I've said that this space here, it's what is called indentation in Python. So for instance, if I write it there without any indentation, I will get an indentation error. Why? Because Python was expecting an indentation here because of this colon. So every time you put this colon at the end of a particular line in Python, you have to ensure that you have indented the line or the lines that follows this colon. Now, to correct this error, I need to remember that in Python, indentation is 4 spaces. So I can either say 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I run, I'll have corrected the error. Alternatively, I can go back to this colon and I press enter on my keyboard, and also it will work. So the second way, you can also do the same, print from 1 to 10 using a while loop. So let us first label our subsection as a level 2 header using a while loop. Because this one is not code, it's narrative text that is labeling our subsection, we have to ensure that the cell type of this cell is selected as a markdown from this drop-down menu. So automatically you'll see that now it is a level 2 header. Once we click it, we can be able to see it from the content bar. So let's go ahead and write our code. Because we are writing a Python code, we have to ensure that we have selected code as a cell type of this cell. So for you to write a while loop, you have to start with a starting point. So our starting point I is equals to 1. That is our starting point. Then you have to tell Python explicitly that you're using a while loop. To tell Python that you're using a while loop, you have to begin this line with a keyword, a Python keyword, while. So then after while, you have to put a condition that has to be met. While I is less than 11. So it's telling us, so long as this condition is true, y is less than 11, do this. Now this do this, it has to be indentation because that is what will be looped. So you have to print I. So then if you say print I, then you have to ensure that we have incremented our value of I so that we can reach 11. So because we want to, you say I equals to I plus 1. So this line, the second line here, is telling us that increment I by 1 after you have printed it, so that it can become 2 if it was 1. So if I run this particular code, I can be able to see that it has printed from 1 to 10. Now, for example, I had put a wrong indentation there, and I had put a wrong indentation. So if I do this, I'll get an indentation error because after this colon, Python was expecting an indentation. And you can do indentation in two ways. First, you can go back to where the colon was and you hit enter on your keyboard. And then you come here, you go back and you press enter on your keyboard. Then if you run it, it will work. So these spaces are 4 spaces. 4 spaces, for example, if you go back to there, you can see it's 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go back there, you have to ensure it is 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is the convention of Python, that indentations are usually 4 spaces. And so while loop runs a particular block of code when the condition is true. For example, it's telling Python that if this condition I is less than 11, you should run this block of code that has two statements. So for example, maybe you put this without indenting it properly, you will get an infinite loop, because this loop will run infinitely because you have not included this incrementing operator in this block of code for the while loop. So let us run it. So once you run it, you'll see that this star is indicating that it is running an infinite loop. It is printing one loop forever. So after some time, your computer will hang because you have run an infinite loop. So to correct this particular indentation error, you have first to go to kernel and then you restart to clear all output. So once you have restarted and you have cleared all outputs, then you need to correct this indentation error by making sure that it is in the while block of code. So let us do 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it will be in the while loop. So if we run it, you can see now our while loop has run as expected. So indentation is very, very important in Python, and Python uses indentation in a very big way. Now, let me demonstrate the use of indentation by writing a Python function that adds two numbers. So, let us label our subsection as a Python function that adds two numbers. So because this is not Python code, it is narrative text, we have to ensure that the cell type of this cell is selected as Markdown from this drop-down menu. So then we have to also remember that this one is a level 1 header because we want to include it in the table of content. So we'll put one hashtag with a space to indicate that it's a level 1 header. So then after writing, if you see it from the content bar on your left, you can be able to see that it has been added as a level 1 header. So let us go ahead and write our function. So when you write a function, you have to begin with a Python keyword, def. So this one, keyword def, tells Python that you are about to define a function or to create a function. Then after writing def, you have the second thing that you need to write is the name of your function. So let us name our function add underscore to underscore numbers. One thing that you should remember while naming functions and also variables, the function name or the variable names need to have only one name. So because the name has to have only one name, that's why we put an underscore between words. Because if we put add then with a space 2, it or then with a space number, it will give us an error. To avoid that naming error, you have now to make sure that you have put this underscore to ensure that it is only one word. Then after that one, we have to put opening and closing parentheses to indicate that the input, so that inside this parenthesis we can define the input of this function, also called the argument of this function. Then we can say because we are adding two numbers, our function will have two input. Input 1 will be number 1, and then the input 2 will be number 2. So this number 1 and number 2 has to be one word because it's the name of the input. The first input and the second input, or the first argument or the second argument. So if you put num space 1, it will give you an error because this one is a name and it cannot be two words. It has to be one word. And then after defining the input of the function, you have now to put this colon. Because this colon comes at the end of this line, it will expect indentation in the next line. So if I press enter, automatically Python will indent. So so let us define our what we call it as a docstring. So this docstring that is usually defined using three quotation marks, normally it's kind of a manual about how this function operates. So it's a good practice to always include the docstring in your functions. So the first line in the docstring will define what this function does. So let me write this Python function adds two numbers. So this is just telling the users of this function that this function adds two numbers. So then let us define input. So let us say the input of the function, also called argument. So, so the argument of this functions, we can say it has two arguments. So the first one is number 1, which is the first number, and also this one you have to define to users what this number 2. So and then you tell them that it is an maybe a number. So this one, let's say it is a float, meaning it can be a decimal number or even an integer. So float in Python is also used to indicate that it is a decimal number. Int is integer, meaning it also can be a whole number. So this one is just telling users that they can enter either float decimal numbers, or they can enter integers or whole numbers. So the second number 2, which is the second number, which can be either a float or it can also be an integer, meaning a whole number. Then let us define the output, what this function will give users. So the output of this function, output, it's also called returns. So the output of the function is actually what this function will return to the users who is using it or who is calling it. So we are expecting it to give a sum, a total. So this is the sum of the true numbers. Then after you have defined the docstrings, so this one is not part of the code. It's this one because triple quotes is telling Python to ignore everything here. You don't include it as a Python code. It's just like a comment. This one is just as a comment telling the users of this function how to use the functions. It's like the manual. So the second thing that we need to write now, let's begin by saying that the total total equals to number 1 plus number 2, this one. So this one is a computing total. Even we can put a single line comment using this say compute the total, the sum of the two numbers. So this is a single line comment that is basically telling what this line does. It's computing the total of these two numbers that the users entered. Then after writing that one, so let us output or return the answer to the user. So to return in Python, we normally use the word return. So we are returning total. So all these are inside the functions. What tells Python that all these lines are inside this function is this indentation that you have included here. So all these lines have to be indented with 4 spaces to indicate that it's a block of code that are inside this function that you have created. So this function, because you have created ourselves in Python, it's called user defined function because we defined it ourselves. Now if we run it, we will not get any answer. The reason why we will not get any answer is because Python functions are written so that they can be used later. So uh, so let so so let me write another subsection. So let me say task. So say you have been given a particular task. So this task is you have been told that you add 5 and 4 using the function that you wrote. So this is a task that you have been given. Because you have written this in this narrative text in Jupyter Notebook and it's not part of code, you have to ensure that this line is marked markdown from this drop-down menu, so that if you run it, you can see add 5 and 4 using the function that you wrote. So the first thing that you say, it's total. So let me include a single line comment. Comments in Python usually begins with this hashtag. So add 5 and 4. So you have to call the functions. So to call the functions to compute 5 and 4, to call the function to compute the sum of 5 and 4, you have to call it by its name. So you'll say add 2 underscore 2 numbers, and then you put this opening and closing parenthesis. Inside this opening and closing parenthesis, you can say number. You can now define the input. Number 1 equals to 5. Like the first number is 5, while the second number equals to 4. That means that you have given you have given your input values by calling these functions by its name. Then you can maybe store your result in answer. So you have assigned the value that it will be outputted or it will be returned by this function when you call it to this variable called answer. So when you run it, you see this add two numbers is not defined because I've misspelled number. The name of the function was add two numbers, but I've called it as add two numbers, which is not defined. To correct it, you have to make sure that you have called the function with its proper name. So if I run it now, because I've corrected by adding s here, if I run it, I can be able to see it has run successful. So if I want to see the value that is in answer, I have to print the answer. So if I print answer, I can be able to see the answer is 9. Let's say that I had put a wrong indentation here. So putting a wrong indentation here, meaning after this colon in this line that defines a function called add two numbers, I did not put this indentation where it was expecting it. So if I run it, I'll get indentation error because after this colon, an indentation was expected from this point because all these lines belong to this function. So to correct it, I need to indent all these lines, all these lines. And I need to remember that indentation in Python is supposed to be 4 spaces, like 1, 2, 3, 4. This one is also 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 spaces. So if I run it now, because all are 4 spaces, I can see that I can be able now to get the answer. Another wrong indentation is maybe put this return, instead of putting it into 4, maybe you put it into 1. If you put it into 1 indentation, this return, it will not even run, because this one, it will tell you this indentation, which is only 1 space, does not match the others, which are 4 spaces. So you have to make sure that each and every one is 4 spaces. So for example, if I run it now, because I've returned it to 4 spaces, it will run as normal. For example, if again I put this one into maybe 2 indentations, so this one you'll also see it has been highlighted with red, meaning there is an error in this line. So if I run it, Python will tell me that this total, the indentation of this total is not does not match the rest. This one is 2, while these are 4. Now you have to make sure that all the indentations have matched. If you have used 4 spaces, you should ensure that all of them that belongs to this function have been matched. Same to even here, it is 4 spaces. So if this one is 4 spaces, 1, 2, 3, 4. You should also make sure that this one is 4 spaces. If you make it 3, 1, 2, 3, it will give you an expected indentation error, because it is expecting this one to be 4. Now let me show you an indentation error that you can get when you include indentation where you are not supposed to include. For example, if we include indentation, one indentation in this line, you will get an indentation error. If we run, it will tell you unexpected indent. The reason why you have gotten this unexpected indent, because you have given it a one indentation while you are not supposed to give it, because at the end of this first line that has a comment, there is no colon at the end of it. So if there is no colon at the end of a line, the following line should not have any indentation. So to correct it, you need to go back and you hit run. So if you hit run, you will see that the error will go, the unexpected indent error will go. But if maybe you indent it 1, 2, 3, 4 and you run it, you'll still get an expected indent error indicating that you have included an indent where it's not supposed to be. So the general rule is if this line this first line has no any indentation or has no any colon, the lines that follow should not have any indentation. Now, I'm going to share with you three concepts that when you follow them, you will avoid getting indentation errors when running your Python codes or when you are running your Python programs. The first concept that you need to keep it in your mind is that if you use a colon symbol at the end of a particular line in your Python code or in your Python program, you should indent the line that follows it or the lines that follows it if that block of code has multiple lines. Another important concept that you need to follow to avoid indentation error is to remember that if you have multiple lines inside an if, elif, else, for, while, and def block of code, you will need to indent all the lines in the block of code, and all the indentation in that block of code will need to have the same indentation. That is 4 spaces. That is the convention of Python. Another important concept to remember if you want to avoid indentation error is to remember that if a line does not follow a line that had a colon at the end of it, you should not indent that particular line. This is because it is not expecting any indentation because the previous line had no colon at the end of it. Now, let me thank you for watching this video till the end. I highly appreciate. If this video has been helpful to you, kindly smash the like button and subscribe to this channel so that you can help us reach to many other people.